guys, and hey, welcome back to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm your host, Jason Lee, here with my co-host, CLINT AKIN.
Yay!
And we are joined today by Chris Mudd, Managing Director of Chiron Financial. Chris, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
And we are going to talk about the chemical industry, and then also inside of the chemical industry, kind of an unknown player, which is M&A, acquisitions, and investment banking, and how does capital affect what's going on in the marketplace today, and then also the outlook of the chemical space. What does growth look like inside of that, and then how do you fuel growth by getting people involved to do just that? And that's kind of in the what Chris is in the business of, and so he's got just an unbelievable experience and background in the chemical space. So it's a really good parlay from what does the outlook look like, but then now his new role, and how do we then support a growth outlook, because a lot of people have been watching if you've been staying tuned to our shows, while the economy, people are nervous and anxious and a little bit concerned about what they're seeing globally, here in our neck of the woods, as we start to onshore, bring supply chain back home, do more things here, there's going to be opportunity for development. There's going to be opportunity for growth, and then somebody's got to pay for that. And so that's one of those things that people got to talk about. And so we're going to hear more about how that gets done. So Chris, why don't you inform our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself.
And the magic wand, because that's how all the magic happens, right? With the funding, it's just a magic wand.
Exactly, it just happens. Sure. So I've been in the chemical industry my entire career, going on 4 decades. I'm a chemical engineer. I started out with Dow Chemical in Texas, Dow's a great company. Got to do a lot of different things with Dow. I ended up running a Dow Exxon joint venture that was headquartered here in Houston, and somewhere along the lines when I was running that, Dow and Exxon decided to sell the business, and that was really my first experience with mergers and acquisitions. Actually, it was 11 years ago today we sold that company to a overseas strategic buyer, and I just was really fascinated with the world of M&A and with the way decisions get made about how businesses get valued, and when companies decide to buy versus build. And so from there, I started up a company in Dallas that we merged 6 businesses, several of which were in the Houston area, and we took that public on the NASDAQ, and that company is now trading at $2 billion, so that was a real big success. And then most recently, I was CEO of a little specialty chemical company here in Houston, just up the road, and that was owned by private equity. So I've gotten to experience a lot of the different factors of different types of investors and how they look at the chemical industry.
Right.
And then most recently I joined Chiron Financial, which is a middle market investment bank here in Houston, although we've got offices around the world. And we help companies grow. We help raise capital for companies that are looking to either invest and grow, or maybe they need to raise capital for some kind of an acquisition. We also sometimes help businesses when they're looking to sell some or all of their business.
A little bit of restructuring as well, right?
Right. Yeah, fair amount of restructuring.
So to kick off the show, I think we'll talk a little bit about, because you have such an expertise, and you're probably getting to see the chemical industry from a different perspective. I mean, obviously as an investment banker, your firm's responsible for trying to make educated decisions on what to buy, who to give money to, and why to give money to them. So you have to have a keen eye for what's taking place in the industry, they wouldn't hire you to do it, right? So,
absolutely.
So I think the first place to start is because I think our audience we're all anxious to get different insight as to really what the outlook looks like for the chemical industry. So we just came out of COVID, so we saw the impact there. I'd love to hear what you've seen from COVID, and then maybe what it's starting to look like globally and domestically after COVID, with all the stuff that's going on now with the war and and the supply chain problems.
Sure. No, obviously it was a big disruptor in the chemical industry. There were actually some pockets of the chemical industry that were helped by the demand for things like PPE, masks. My former company, Dexco, had a great year because they make all the adhesives and elastics that go into N95 masks. Hand sanitizer manufacturers. There were a lot of businesses that went through the roof. But generally speaking, it's when you have that kind of a disruption, it's difficult to manage through it. So I think for the chemical industry overall, the chemical industry has weathered the storm really, really well, and especially the U.S. chemical industry. I think it's taught. The further you go down the chain, you realize the importance of having domestic supply of your key raw materials. And I think folks found out that if they had materials coming in from the other side of the world, and then all of a sudden you've got something like COVID that happens, your supply chain really gets tested, and it makes people think twice about importing all these components rather than finding domestic sources. And so I think that's going to be a really good thing for the U.S. Chemical industry, and especially here in the Houston area.
Yeah, and so as you think about what it's going to do, and we've talked a little bit about the impact in the Houston area. Fast forward a couple of years from now, what do you think the outlook looks like when you say it's going to be a good thing for the industry? Maybe you don't know percentages, but I guess from a shift, right? So if you said, hey, 70% of the stuff is coming out from the other side of the planet, is that pendulum going to shift the other way?
Yeah, I mean, it's been in my career, I can remember a period of time, maybe 10, 15 years ago, when the conventional wisdom was that all the new ethylene crackers are going to be built in the Middle East, all the new chemical plants are going to be built in Asia because that's where all the demand growth is. That has come full circle, in a large part because of shale gas, and now the U.S. has plentiful, low-cost feedstocks, and you combine that with the demand, with the skilled labor, with the a stable business environment, and I'm very bullish on the U.S. chemical industry, and you can
a lot of existing infrastructure too, the pipelines to support it.
A lot of existing infrastructure, yeah. And then you've seen a lot of the announcements coming out where this is where companies want to expand and grow. And so we help facilitate that, and it's I would say we don't work necessarily with the big chemical industry players because they've got more options. I mean, they've got cash flow to pay for these projects. They can issue stock. They've got all kinds of different ways to finance a huge project. We tend to work with the smaller and middle market clients who need a little more help to find funding for growth or find funding for some kind of an acquisition.
Fantastic. And so typically it's this smaller middle market company too that's doing a lot of the innovation, right? So this is usually where you'll see a lot of innovation. So it's kind of it's tough when you're pitching innovation because you might not have a track record, or you might not have the same type of bandwidth or experience as perhaps these big brands that it's easy to go sell stock.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about maybe the type of companies that where that opportunity lies, and then also for example, the ones that you're seeking, right? So tell us a little bit about that in this space.
Yeah, I mean, people, when they think about the chemical industry, they think about the big industry players that are making the building block chemicals like ethylene and styrene. But the reality is that there's a lot of innovation in the specialties area, and a lot of investors are looking for, they prefer the specialty type of products. So there's less competition, higher margins, higher growth, and there's real innovation going on where people are coming out with new products and new technologies. And so that's really where the excitement is. Everything starts out as a specialty, and then once it gets sufficiently big, it becomes more of a commodity. But specialties is really where things get started. And so we tend to focus on that, and the investment groups that we work with are specifically looking for opportunities that are going to grow faster than GDP, where there's some kind of innovation or technical advantage for the products.
Gotcha. And now when it comes to recently we've seen, especially with the impact of the crude oil that comes from Russia, and I know that there's a balance between West Texas oil and then the crude that's coming in, and how those two supply chains kind of have to meet to then supply the chemical industry. And then we had a hiccup where we're now not able to get what we need from Canada, who could also be a crude supplier. How does that kind of disruption impact y'all's decision-making process when you see these types of things? Because, I mean, what has to happen stateside to get that oil to where it needs to be at so that we can continue to produce chemicals at the level that we need to?
Right, yeah, no, it's been, I think globally the supply of oil and gas is unaffected by the Russia, Ukraine war, but it's been a huge disruptor to global supply chains. I mean, it's now you've got to move different materials from different regions of the world, and the shipping lanes aren't necessarily set up, and so it's supply chain, and I think logistics personnel have been tested over the last month, and really throughout COVID. I mean, unloading container ships on the West Coast was a real challenge during the height of the pandemic. Now you've got this new challenge where, we're trying to move heavy crude from some regions to supplement the WTI that we have here domestically, and it's been a real challenge for especially for some of the smaller middle-sized companies that don't have the logistic capabilities to be able to do that. I think we're going to get through it. The markets have been really affected, and the pricing of crude oil has been pretty volatile over the last couple of years. And this is one of the things that makes investors a little bit skittish about the oil and gas industry, is this kind of price volatility.
Right.
It's kind of daunting, and I would just say that for the typical private equity investor, for the typical family office investor, they're not going to get into this market. It really requires specialized knowledge and to be willing to put your investments there. It's really not for the faint of heart, because you have to really understand the industry dynamics.
Gotcha. And so when people ask, that's a great question around, well, what does an investment banker do? I think it sounds really cool, investment banker. But the reality is it's that money, that money that we have a saying in our firm that the banks, when you actually need money, they'll never give it to you, and when you don't need money, they're happy to give it to you. That's the traditional bank, right? You walk in, you got a good bankroll, you got tons of money in the bank, and they're like, hey, I'll give you the best loan ever. You're trying to start a company, and you got this phenomenal idea and this great stuff. They're like, dude, you're going to need some assets, and you're going to need all this other stuff.
Right.
That's maybe when it's a good time to call Chris, right, or look into.
Yeah,
talk to us about that.
It's gratifying when we're able to help a client. I have one example I can give you. Chemical company over in Galena Park, and they were really profoundly affected by COVID. The demand for the demand for their specialty chemicals they were producing went way down. And then they had recently made a large capital investment to produce renewable jet fuel. Well, you remember in March of 2020, the whole world stopped flying in airplanes. And so it was tough. And they were facing default. And so they came to us in late 2020, and we started working with them. And top to bottom, worked with this company, figured out how to get access to PPP money. We figured out how to kind of restructure their existing debt. We figured out how to bring in new lines of capital from different investors that wanted to support this business. And the good news is we avoided any kind of disaster scenario. Now the company is doing really well. They're back on track, making positive margin right now. And I think that the future is pretty bright. And it feels really gratifying when you're able to step in and help a company that's struggling and help them get through the tough times. And all the commercial banks had already said no to this particular client. So, it's very gratifying.
Impact as well, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people that got to keep their jobs.
Absolutely. Hundreds of people kept their jobs, and the company, comes through and has a bright future. And so, we're looking for those kind of scenarios where we can come in and help get them through a tough time. And, these cyclical pricing can really put folks in a pinch. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we can try to help.
Fantastic. And then as we think about the future, I know a lot of the future, a lot of people don't realize that this industry in and of itself is very mindful and methodical about energy renewables and changing the way that we do things. It always seems to be turned like, almost like an us against them mentality, but behind the scenes, we're actually very forward thinking when it comes to so the reality and the truth of this industry is that there's a lot of energy and effort being spent. We just had a person on earlier talking about all the solar and renewable work that's being put into this region to help support it. And so it's like, okay, that's the truth. So talk to us about the chemical industry and how it helps drive the transition and the energy transition in the future.
Yeah, the chemical industry is going to be the key to having a successful energy transition. All of the materials for the solar systems, for the wind turbines, people, when they think about the chemical industry, they think about reducing the carbon footprint of the chemical plants, and that will happen. That's already been happening. But in addition to that, the chemical industry facilitates all industries to be able to become more efficient, to reduce their carbon footprint, come up with new chemical processes that are able to make chemicals in a greener way. I have a lot of colleagues that I started out with in the industry decades ago, and many of them have retired from places like Exxon or Dow or Chevron, and they've started up some kind of a new green chemistry project to try to commercialize some of these technologies. There's just a lot of work. Many of those need capital for growth, and so that's where we come in. But it's exciting to see. I think the chemical industry is just as interesting and exciting now as it was when I came into the industry back in the 80s. There's a lot of innovation going on.
Great, yeah, it's going to continue to go on as we continue to evolve, and I think a big overlying theme inside of that is that the irony behind all that work is that you have to have oil and gas to support the work that then supports energy and renewables. So it's not either or, it's both.
Right.
No question about it.
And
Hydrocarbons aren't going away. We can't not use hydrocarbons. We have to have them. But how we use them, that's what this energy transition is all about. So I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were talking about solar panels, and it was a good discussion.
Yeah.
We weren't in complete agreement from the get-go, but by the end of the conversation, I was telling him, the chemical industry puts coatings on the solar panels.
Mm-hmm. Right.
To make them more effective.
Yeah.
So if you went too far away from the chemical industry, those solar panels aren't going to be as effective.
Yeah, so I think the challenge,
things that people don't realize.
I think the challenge we have is, I think everyone acknowledges that someday in the future we're going to be, we're going to have a lot more electric vehicles. We're going to have a much higher percentage of our energy grid will be solar and wind and renewables. No question about it. The only question is when is that going to happen? And the challenge from the investment community is there are investors who have decided, okay, well then therefore I'm not going to put any more investment into traditional oil and gas type of projects because we're all going to be going renewable. But it's not going to happen immediately. And really a lot of the investment in traditional oil and gas is going to fund all of that, move towards greener renewable sources of energy. And it's going to take, I think it's going to take decades to get there. So,
but they're embracing it. That's what's kind of nice. Even your larger oil and gas companies, your smaller oil and gas companies, they really are trying to chase this energy transition and embrace it and welcome it.
It's a great opportunity. I mean, I think every large and every medium-sized chemical company and oil company has a significant initiative. They're putting some really strong, capable managers in charge of these projects to try to drive it forward. And I think it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And so, as with all this opportunity, with all the things that are going to exist out there, talk to us about the right fit for the financial community, because someone's going to hear this and they're or maybe they're playing golf this weekend and their buddy's like, man, if I could just get this, what is it that you guys are looking for in this space?
Right.
That is that's a good opportunity to step in, and this is when investment banking needs to step in and get involved.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we really get involved in two different areas. We love to help healthy, growing companies, and so if there's a company that needs to raise capital to, double their manufacturing capacity, they are needing to raise capital to make an acquisition, buy a complementary business that will, grow that way. Maybe they need capital to refinance existing debt. We can help them, and so we work with those companies, kind of put the whole story together, figure out how they're going to be successful, and then take that story out to the investment community, and we'll talk to sometimes dozens or hundreds of prospective investors and tell the story. The other area that we get involved in is companies that are struggling. We frequently, and this is more specific to Chiron Financial, is if we're known for one thing, it's working with companies that are in a distressed situation. So maybe they've gotten hurt badly by COVID, they've gotten hurt badly by price volatility. We think the economy now is heading into a period of inflation and probably heading towards a recession at some point in the next few years. And so there are going to be companies that get caught on the wrong side of that, and they need help to work their way out of it. And so we work with a lot of those companies to raise capital, replace their existing debt, and give them sufficient breathing room to be able to grow their way out of their difficulties. So those are really the two different things we do.
Fantastic. And as we get ready to wrap up today, is there anything that you wanted to share or any additional highlights that we didn't cover that you think we need to tell as far as part of your story?
We got to mention Mary Jane at least, right?
Yeah, my wife is the executive director of ECMA, the East Harris County Manufacturers Association. We met over 30 years ago at Dow Chemical. I know that's a very romantic place to meet, but our family has been.
The flare stacks were burning.
Yeah, exactly.
Like candles, right?
Exactly, and our daughter is a chemical engineer. We're all in on the chemical industry and big supporters. We believe in it. We've seen all the good things that the chemical industry brings to life. And unfortunately, it gets sort of a bad reputation sometimes, and it's not fully deserved. And so, we love to have a chance to be able to talk about all the good things that the chemical industry brings to life and to people.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to share?
No, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Really appreciate it, and keep doing what you guys are doing.
Fantastic. So, as always, with our audience, we want to encourage you that this show and the story of the Economic Alliance is about really educating, painting the picture, and helping people understand the value not only of this region, but of Texas and the industries that we support: oil and gas, development, construction, industrial, chemical. It all flows through our port region, and then it makes an impact in our world. And we've seen there's been no bigger magnifying glass on supply chain and the issues around it and why it's so critical in the chemical industry than in the last 24 months. So we're hoping that people will see that and go, wow, okay, I really need to get involved and know more about what's taking place down there. And then like that, companies invest in it or grow, or where can we invest our growth? And as companies look to where they want to build and start, developing new projects, bring them here, right?
Come here, yeah.
Come here. We'll welcome you, and Chris will give you some money. So, so we're excited about that. So please, again, as always, go to the allianceportregion.com to subscribe to our channel, to stay tuned in. You can follow Clint and myself on LinkedIn. Chris, you can probably get connected to us on LinkedIn as well. And then make sure you stay tuned into us through our channels: YouTube, Facebook, all the different social media channels, your favorite place to check in with podcast. And please take this episode, and if you know somebody who needs to hear it, pay it forward and give it to them so that they can actually stay tuned in as well. And we'll see you guys next week.